we're going to do today, and yes, I am a human nutritionist. Yes, I am a food scientist. I specialize in the science of food. Sounds cool, and it is cool. Everything from ice cream to baby formula and everything in between. It is an architectural system like no other, and it's absolutely fascinating, and I love it because it does impact on health, and it has a huge impact on longevity and how we actually live our lives. So I am going to weave that in, but the aim is for you guys to get a feel for the fact that I just asked you if there are any experts in the room, and I'm sitting in a room filled with experts. So I'm going to help you to understand what your expertise is. Now, my induction into feedlotting started on Sunday. So I'm like hardcore expert in this 100%. When I drove out to Barb and Don's feedlot down near Gundawindi. But it's been really interesting to be here for the last couple of days and everything that I've been learning. And the big thing I've learned and I've heard and I've asked the questions is perception, perception, perception. People don't like us. They think that what we do isn't right for the animals, that it's not healthy, that red meat's not that great. Perception, perception, perception. So let's get this balance right, okay? Now before we actually get on to the hardcore thing, ironically, I was in Melbourne a couple of weeks ago, and this poster was up on the Burke Street Mall, and so I don't normally get involved with activists, but they asked, prove me wrong. So I said, are you guys really open to this? You want me to prove you wrong? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay. We will do this, but on one condition: no swearing, no calling names, and you give me the platform in front of your stadium. They had this little podium in the Burke Street Mall. They had about 100 people watching them. And so I stood there and I'm like, what you're saying is completely inaccurate. Now you throw me any question and I'll prove you wrong. And so they did. Like, meat causes cardiovascular disease. Well, actually, it doesn't cause cardiovascular disease. We've got genetics. We've got physical inactivity. It's about nutrient density. That's what causes cardiovascular disease. I mean, you could literally eat Oreos, and if that's all you ate, it's vegan, but you could get cardiovascular disease. So, come on. Then we went on to the animal cruelty side of things. I'm like, have you actually been out onto an animal property? Have you actually seen what these guys do? Even if they hated their animals and they were the most wicked people in the world, it is in their best financial back pocket interest to keep those animals happy and safe, because that's what gives you good meat quality. Like, all right, fair enough. Okay, keep going. Like, well, plants are going to save the world. I'm like, if plants were going to save the world, the third world would not be the third world. There's malnutrition for a reason, because they don't have access to good quality nutrition. So at the end of this whole thing, I had 100 people, and they were here to hear the activists. The activists packed up their table, and 100 people gave me a round of applause, and I went off and had lunch. So it's important to know your stuff. The point is, it's important to know your stuff, to know who you are, to know your expertise, to stay in your lane, and to own your space. And anyone can do that. Okay? I'm not going to turn you all into nutritionists, but we are going to start way back in history, because we have to, if we're really going to understand this whole thing about you guys and what you do, creating a nutrient-dense goodness for the world, we've got to go back in history. We've got to actually see where have we arrived from where we came from. Now, the hunter-gatherer diet, by and large, is over. There are a couple of tribes that do it, but thanks to the ancient Egyptians, they are the ones who brought us into the broad-scale agricultural world, right? I mean, there's still some people around the world who plant plants by hand, but as I saw on Monday, I mean, agriculture is massive. This is a 1-kilometer irrigator that's controlled by an app. Now, that's pretty much where we've been until about the 1500s. The next innovation was the explorers traveling around the world, discovering cocoa and spices. But by 1800, we had the Industrial Revolution happen, and Louis Pasteur discovered microbes. So you combine those two things together, we created technology, pasteurization, retorting, anything that was heat-related that could kill bacteria to make food safe. And that's literally where we've been. Safety, 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 until 1950, when automation entered the food industry. And so now we're about safety, but we want to get the masses of food out there so everyone can eat. And that's still where we're at. But we've got to deal with all these other things like global trade and protection. We've got artificial intelligence entering the scene now, trying to understand why people do what they do. By and large, our world has changed. I mean, we're still on planet Earth. We've still got different continents. We've still got water. We've got soil. But it's changed. A light bulb in the 1950s is not the light bulb in 2000, is not the light bulb in 2022. And even though humans have not grown wings or unicorn horns, we're largely still the same structure. We've changed. Yesterday, Michael McQueen spoke about Gen Z and how they think and what they like and all their TikToking. We've got to understand who we are as human beings and the different generations. Now, through it all, nutrition is the one thing that has not changed because the human body runs off fuel. Really important. We need good quality fuel. Now, nutrition as a science is only about 220 years old, so we're really young. And we started off by looking at individual nutrients, proteins, vitamins, minerals, but now we've moved into trying to understand how these things interact with our gut microbiome, how they interact with our genetics, personalized nutrition. So we're getting high tech as well, right? At the same time, so we've got all these things running in parallel. Can you see it? Lots of different things happening simultaneously in parallel. So where do you guys fit in? I mean, it'd be lovely if the cows all lived like this, because that's what, David Attenborough documentaries look like. But the truth is, most of Australia looks like that. We're not very green. And Calvin told us today that, there's a lot of cows up in Canada that have the great snow to deal with. And then there's lot feeders. And you might feel like you're a teeny tiny little piece of the jigsaw puzzle, but you're actually a really important piece of the jigsaw puzzle. So by the end of the time, I hope you get it. Now, really important to realize the biggest issue we've got going on is that we're growing, okay? Who in this room is 30 years or under? Not me, okay? All right, I want everybody to look at these people who are under the age of 30. Because in 70 years' time, 77 years' time, 2100, these guys are probably still going to be alive. They'll be really old, admittedly, like 90-something, but they'll be alive. So if we don't set up a good food supply, we're essentially killing off all these 30-year-olds. Sorry, guys. I'm going to try and keep you guys alive for the next generation. If we're not here, that's cool. Our kids are going to be here. My nephews and nieces are going to be here. That's who we're actually dealing with. 2100 is not that far away. It may look like it's far away, but it's really not. And the people who are part of it are not that far away. And it's important to look at where is populations growing around the world. Now, one thing you will notice is that Australia does not change. We stay largely the same. Even New Zealand has more people per kilometer, but we stay largely the same. But look at the density. Africa, South America, Asia. This is the amount of people per kilometer of landmass. So we got a lot of people growing in these populations that are very close to us. And the thing that we've got for us is that we're a giant-sized island with lots of grass and sand. So it's, it's desirable in a lot of ways, but it doesn't make it that conducive for population growth. But it does mean we can feed a lot of people. Now, this always gets to people when I show them this slide. We've held the majority of the world's GDP has been with the developed world for a very long time, until 2008. 2008 was pivotal. It's when there was 50-50% parity between the developing world and the developed world. And since then, that has tracked downwards. So the most wealth is actually held by the emerging markets. It's just that there's a lot of people over there. So per person, they've got less per person, but they've actually got a lot in total. Now, given the fact that they are growing, massive population growth, it's important to start thinking about our markets and where we actually position our food. Yes, we've got some really high-end Wagyu that is for that, that gold teaspoon in certain markets, but there's a lot of other markets that we can play in as well. Now, food, I really got a sense of this weekend. It's just too good to waste. Even the most sustainably farmed foods just doesn't do us any good if it's not eaten. not just in terms of our physical health, but in terms of all of the input that has gone to make that product. So we've really, you guys are stewards of that. So, where does agriculture fit into the greatest scheme of things, okay? Yesterday, Peter Costello said mining and agriculture go together, mining, agriculture, agriculture, agriculture. I like to think that we're just as important as mining, if not more. Mining contributes to the nation's GDP 6.4%. And then we've got manufacturing, and then we've got agriculture. Here's the thing. 30% of our manufacturing is actually food related. So when you work that out, it means that it's a total of 4.5%, which is ag food, that we contribute to the nation's GDP. We're important. We're a really important sector. Without us, and we just had to rely entirely on mining, this nation would collapse. So it's really important to value ourselves from that perspective as well. Now, this is why Australia doesn't grow in terms of people per kilometre of land mass. You can see it, how we actually use our land. At least 45% of it is grazing, and it's grazing on plains, eating up, the grass that's just looking pretty sad out there. But that's what they do. They eat the native vegetation. We cannot actually grow fresh produce on it. For all the alternate proteins of the world, we can't put chickpeas out there. We just can't. We've got to put cows out there. They're the only ones who can actually eat that stuff and do something useful with it. So that is actually a really good story for you guys to own, because that is literally the confines of this nation. We can't change that. The other thing that's really important to see, and this is from the FAO, and yeah, it is a little bit old, but the data is still, I haven't really updated it, but it seems to be the same, is that from all the different commodity groups, meat is the one that actually has the least amount of wastage. Meat has the least amount of wastage from production all the way through to retail. I mean, consumers definitely waste food and they need to take ownership of their own behavior, but the rest of it, meat's the industry that actually has the least amount of food waste, the end. That's pretty epic, because we're all about sustainability and we're all about waste reduction, and you guys are doing an amazing job at operational efficiency. So like he said yesterday, yeah, there's not many countries that are able to be the food bowl, but Australia definitely is positioned physically and within the confines of our environment that we actually can. And we should really take that up. Now, here's the thing. We eat food, not nutrients. And this is where nutrition gets a bit funny, because people are always asking me, like, how much protein should I have, and how much fat, and what type of fat, and how much carbohydrate, and should I have this, and should I have that? Unless you are sick and you're in hospital and you're on IV drip, or you're a newborn baby drinking infant formula, no one eats like that. Like every single one of us, we just had lunch. Were there piles of pills out there? And if there were piles of pills out there, I'm pretty sure we'd be all complaining to Esther, like, what is this? We eat food, not nutrients. But food is an essential source of nutrients. So it's really important to keep that in mind. I'm going to use this as a little case study. So this little kid over here, he's got a condition called kwashiorkor. Kwashiorkor happens in kids over the ages of 18 months, under 5 years. Marasmus happens in kids from newborn up until about 18 months. And you can see he's got skinny little arms, skinny little legs. The feet are swollen, that's edema, and there's massive belly. Now, most people think that this child hasn't got enough food to eat. That's not true. They actually eat enough calories. They eat all the calories they actually need, so their energy is perfect. The problem is that they don't have enough protein in their diet, because protein is essential for carbohydrate metabolism. So if you're having a diet that is predominantly starches and taros and maize, you're getting a lot of carbohydrate into you, not much protein, they can't actually metabolize that energy. And that's why they end up with this condition, and they can die from it. Now, these guys over here, one of them's a pediatrician and the other one's a food scientist. The pediatrician talked to his friend who's the food scientist and said, we have this issue, it's so sad, these kids are dying, and there's literally not much we can do apart from put them on an IV drip, and there's millions of them dying like this. And so the food scientist was like, hey, I actually got an idea. So they came up with this product in the late 90s called Plum Peanut. And it's a genius product. It's basically peanut skim milk powder, a lot of sugar, some vitamins and minerals. So a good source of protein, a good source of fat. It tastes super sweet, so kids like to eat it. And you can see what happens. They put these children on it. This is in Haiti, just 2022. In the first picture, the kid is 12 months old, weighs 4.5 kilos. You can even see the intestines. That's how malnourished she is. And 12 weeks later, Plum Peanut 3 times a day, because she's getting the amount of protein her body needs. Remember, we eat food, not nutrients, but food is an essential source of nutrients. That child is alive and well, okay? So food has an incredible power. So that is an example of Plum Peanut, and it's used around the world in those sort of situations. But we've got stuff like this. Now, red meat, and this is actually mine. I cooked this, so I do actually eat meat. A lot of people think I'm a vegetarian, but I'm not. When we sell these sort of products, I mean, we know it's a great source of protein, but then, tofu is a great source of protein too, so are chickpeas. Not all proteins are the same. What else is it about it? And, the research is really clear. Red meat is, if I were to use the marketing term, it is a superfood. It is nutrient dense with a lot of really, really, really good stuff. You don't need much to get a lot of benefit from it. I don't need to have a half a dozen supplements if I have 90 grams of red meat 3 times a week in my diet. So it is really nutrient dense. Okay, it's not the same as eating chicken. It's not the same as eating fish, because it's got a whole lot of other things in it. And that's really important to actually be able to communicate that. Now, that's probably as deep as I'm going to get when it comes to nutrition, right? I want you to really understand where you guys fit into this jigsaw puzzle. And so we have this thing, protein demands are going up, protein demands are going up, protein demands are going up. So we're going to start looking at it from 1960, and I want you to make sure you look at the countries down the bottom, like say Nigeria, India, places like that, and we'll see where they go towards the end by 2017. And so you can see it starts changing. Okay, red meat is in the red bars. It's starting to grow. There's also an increase in plant proteins. And we're talking about chickpeas and legumes and things like that. By the time we get to 2017, Israel is right up on top. Australia, by and large, from 1961 up until, when was this, 2017, actually hasn't changed. So the notion that Australians eat too much meat is erroneous, because we actually don't eat too much meat. We haven't changed. We've literally stayed exactly the same. That's the real hardcore facts, not just my personal emotional belief system. That's the actual facts. When we look at some of these lower down countries, we can see, like say, India, for example, in 1961, they were only having about 5 or 6 grams of red meat, and they're up to 15 grams in 2017. You're talking about massive populations here. 1.3 million people, 1.4 million people in China. So even though it is considerably still less than the developed world, it's still a lot in terms of mass, because there's a lot of people moving up into that. Now, we know as soon as people get a little bit more money, the first thing they do is they spend it on meat. They may not be able to buy the Rolls Royce, the BMW, or the expensive watch, but what they can do is they can buy the Western lifestyle by eating Western food. And the first thing they go for is meat, because meat is nutrient dense. But here's the thing. Not all proteins are the same. So this is just a real brief nutshell. We've got our steak over there, 83 grams. So this is the amount of protein per equal amount of energy. Okay, so all those serves has the same amount of energy. Now, for me to get 21 grams of protein in tofu, I need to eat like 3 times as much. 241 grams of tofu. Okay? If I'm going to eat kidney beans or legumes, I need to eat double the amount, 151 grams of beans. Gosh, I got to fly to South Africa tomorrow. The other people on the plane would not be too happy about that if I did that. So it's really important to realize that just because something says they've got protein, Firstly, how much protein is in there? Is it nutrient dense? Because not all proteins are the same. So we can't compare red meat to something else because we're talking about two different things. So nutrition is not about one particular food product. Okay? It's not about how awesome grain-fed meat is, or how amazing onions are, or how awesome oats are, even though those are part of my 5 superfoods if I were to say 5 superfoods. It's not just about protein. It's not just about iron. It's not just about resistant starch or complex carbohydrates. It is about the combination of different foods and the sum total of all the nutrients that we actually derive from that. And what part do you play in that whole plate? Now, here's the thing. And I was telling this to Sam, is that the biggest problem we have is actually not the red meat industry. It's not even the processed marshmallow industry. It's the public health sector. And I've studied public health, nutrition, and epidemiology. And so I often tell my colleagues in this sector, I'm like, the real issue we've got is you guys. This is the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating. We have not had a triangle since 1980, and yet most people still think we have a triangle. We have a healthy plate. And so you see the numbers on the outside, like say the vegetables is 5, for the protein section there's 3. That is the recommended amount of serves that's needed to have a healthy diet per day to make sure you got nutrient density in there, right? Here's what Australians are actually consuming per person, Australian adults. So recommended protein-rich foods per day is 3. We're hitting 1.8. The best one is our vegetables. We're meant to have 5, and we're having 2.4. Fruits, you'd think that would be pretty easy. We're meant to have 2 of those, and we're having 1.5 of those. If we actually improve the nutritional quality of our daily diet, and we decrease the amount of, sometimes in small amounts, foods, although we're not doing this sometimes in small amounts, we're doing it every day in large amounts. If we decrease that and we start eating the healthy plate, there is a place for red meat in that healthy plate, then everything just balances out. The problem is that this stuff, A, isn't being marketed, and B, it takes personal responsibility. Consumers need to take personal responsibility of what they put in their mouth. Okay? Really important. So that doesn't mean to say that you guys are on the back foot. It just means to say that you have to stand in your presence and own the fact that you actually create a nutritionally dense food product. And if someone's dealing with health issues, they have to deal with their behavior as well. Now, because we're doing such a great job at sticking to the dietary guidelines, it's clearly affecting our actual health as a nation. So yeah, we are living alive for a lot longer. We're staying alive for longer. We're not dying as fast, which is great, but we do have issues with dementia. We do have issues with really badly with obesity. And even though we do have the highest rates of colon cancer survival in the world, we also have the highest rates of colon cancer, full stop. We got too many people getting colon cancer. Is that because of meat, or is that because they're not having enough vegetables and fruit and whole grains in their diet? I think it's probably more of the second thing. Because remember, meat consumption hasn't changed since 1961. Now, I know that a lot of people are afraid, or I hear it so often, that, plant exclusivity, veganism, vegetarianism, it's on the rise, it's on the rise. It's not on the rise. They just make a lot of noise. It's not actually on the rise. Now, this study was done at the end of last year, and it is actually it's a really good study, and it's a great representation for a lot of the developed world. You can see that there are changes in dietary patterns between different age groups. So how many of the 18-24-year-olds are here? 18, 24-year-olds, okay, we got a couple of them. So I'm going to use you guys as the case study, because remember, you're going to be alive in 2100, and we're setting up the food supply to keep you guys alive. When you actually break it down and you look at their behavior, meat eating per se is actually just being an omnivore. There's very few carnivores in the world, right? What is increasing is the flexitarianism. And flexitarianism is still being an omnivore. So instead of having dairy milk in my smoothie in the morning, I'll put almond milk in my smoothie in the morning. I've chosen a plant-based alternative. I may have meatless Monday for dinner, but I've eaten tuna and salad for lunch, and I've had eggs and bacon for breakfast. So I'm flexible. Decreasing a little bit of animal protein doesn't mean to say I've got rid of it completely. So that actually is pretty much the same. Vegetarianism, veganism has not actually increased. Now, in Australia, the data shows us that we've only got about 2% in the country that are plant exclusive, that are exclusively on a vegan-based diet. The general population of Australians, once per week, 30% of us will actually have a nut-based milk, usually in a smoothie, predominantly female, usually in an urban environment as well, before going to the gym. Now, this study was done in the USA by a company called Faunalytics, and they are actually an animal activist organization. So it's one of the best studies out there, done in 2014, and they actually tracked 11,000 people who became plant exclusive for 5 years. And they wanted to see if they remained plant exclusive after 5 years, and if so, why, and if not, why. And what they found is that those who became plant exclusive for health reasons, within 5 years, reverted back to an omnivore diet, because it's very hard to maintain health without animal protein in your diet. It's very hard. So 84% actually went back to being omnivores because of health motivation. In Canada, we don't have this data in Australia, but Canada, again, is it's a great example of a country we can relate to. For the consumers who had gone plant exclusive or vegetarian, a study done by the Canadian government actually found that 60% of them would go back to being an omnivore if they knew that the animal husbandry practices were ethical. So what does that say? It's not that they don't want the product, it's just that they don't know the information. And based on that, they make choices, largely emotional choices, purely because they just don't know. When we actually dig a bit deeper into consumer motivations, for those who actually are consumers who buy plant alternative foods, so we're talking about the plant-based burgers and the chickpea burgers and all those sort of the vegan type foods, the actual main motivator for purchasing that product, by and large, over and above everything else, is health. 70% of them are motivated by health. Animal ethics and the environment are actually a bit lower down. So really important to think about, what do you guys create? Because your product fits this. You're ticking every single box here right now. So do we choose between a donut? Do we choose a chunk of broccoli? Well, it depends. It depends on what you're after, really. There's nothing wrong with having a donut every so often. Do I choose between plants or can I have that steak? Again, remember, you guys are part of the food industry. You're right at the start, but you are part of the food industry. And so it's not about one single food or one single nutrient component. It's about the whole diet quality. And the thing that you create, that food, that grain-fed beef, or that grass-fed beef that is finished on grain, what does it actually bring to the table in terms of nutrient density? A lot. Now, I like to show this graph because it actually puts things into perspective. When we are looking at, and we need to have all of these different layers, we need to have the scientists working on those individual nutrients, we need those food scientists who are working on the food matrix and creating different types of foods, but we can't be reductionist down to one little element. We've actually got to have a look back at where does this food fit in to the entire cycle of life, the quality of life, the impact on health, and then the environment. And I think I don't need to point it out to you because you guys really do fit into the environment, and what you create can have that trickle-on effect on the quality of life, and you're definitely doing the protein-rich foods, which is really important. It's really important for this message to actually be out there. And you're experts in what you do. Now, I actually asked a lot of questions, and I write down what people tell me. So if there's anything you don't want me to write down, make sure you tell me that, because I will write it down. And I learned this the other day, and it really hit me. Every day, 20,000 souls rely on us. And we help the cattle reach their full potential so that they can feed the masses. That is powerful. That is absolutely powerful. Have you ever thought of yourself as a public health practitioner? You're on the equal playing field as a medical doctor, if not more important, because they deal with people once they're sick. Whereas you're creating the products to prevent sickness. to deal with malnutrition, to keep us alive. And so what does this have to do with these two guys? So on the left, we have Usain Bolt, and on the right, we have Dennis Kimetto. He was the world record holder for marathons. He's held them for many, many, many years around the world. First thing I want you guys to look at is their skeletal structure. Usain Bolt's big, he's got massive muscles, he's very blocky, very chunky, whereas our marathon runner, he's lean as a light pole. He's like his arms look very thin, but like they're strong. They're strong. The reason why they're so different is, apart from the fact that they run different styles, they genetically are built differently. One has a lot more slow twitch muscle, one has a lot of fast twitch muscle. So fast twitch muscles are great if you're a sprinter. You can go really fast, and if you're a slow twitch muscle, you can go really long, using up less energy. Now, when Dennis got found, when he actually got, he ran something in Kenya and a scout found him, they sent him to the Nike head office in the USA, and they put him on a special nutritional program to actually develop his genetic potential so he can become this amazing marathon runner. Same things happen with Usain Bolt as well. And that's kind of like what you all do. You have your Wagyus, you have your normal beefs, your Anguses, or whatever they are. You create nutritional diets, feeding them for set periods of time so that those animals, when they come to you at their peak skeletal size, can reach their full muscle potential. You're no different to Usain Bolt or Dennis's nutritional team. And yet we esteem those athletes because they're super cool and they run in the Olympics. And every single one of you is literally part of that type of a crew for these cows. So, hope you feel proud of yourself. I'll leave you with a couple of thoughts. First thing is, I want you to think about this. What is our product's role in the human diet and in societal health? Actually ponder that. Every time you're working with those cows, when you're scrubbing out those troughs or looking at that pen, what is the role of what we make in societal health and in the human diet? Can we make good food better? And I'm not just talking in terms of nutrient density, I'm talking about environmental impact, operational efficiency, all those sort of things. Can we do it? And if you're doing it, A, pat yourself on the back, but B, how do I communicate that? What resources, including expertise, do we need to share our message, to communicate that, and then actually do it? And so it's a really great place to end on that note. My name is Dr. Anneline. I'm going to be here tonight, and then I fly out to South Africa. I'll be back at the end of the year. But hook me up at the Food Scientist, dranneline.com. If you have any questions, shoot it through. I usually get back to you within 48 hours. But I hope you got something out of it. And I hope you realize who you really are, because truthfully, you guys are all experts in your domain. Thank you.